And speaking of the Western freedom, I have to talk to you about this the Black Myth Wukong, the video game. I don't know if
Mm,
you paid attention. We talked about this in the past that when it was developing. So this company, the political correctness company, Sweet Baby, the Canadian company, trying to extort money from them, saying, "Okay, I
yeah.
can tell you how to make it political correct." And the company, I think it's called the Game Science, just saying we don't need your help, right? We're not going to pay you the $7 million, whatever. We
Mm,
know what we're doing, and go read the book. That's all the diversity you need, something like that.
mm,
Basically, middle finger. And this game launched like last week, and it was a massive success. It's
mm,
from the sales, the buzz, the interest, everything is off the chart. Which basically, even though after they launched, there were still people who are saying this is lack of diversity, inclusion, equity, those kind of wokeness
mm.
things. And in the meantime, the fans, the players absolutely supported it. Some people even just said, I'm buying this game because it doesn't have the DEI, etc. So it seemed to me this is a massive backfired political
Yes,
correctness,
I
isn't it?
completely agree. Oh, absolutely. I mean, going back to our previous discussion on this topic, it was a transparent attempt at blackmail. That was the first thing to say, but it has backfired, and I think it shows how tired people in the West are becoming about all of this, and I think that the people who are promoting this are coming along, DEI, and all that.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
they're so bossy and
yeah, yeah.
censorious and difficult. I mean, inevitably, it's provoking a reaction, and in this case, a huge one.
Yeah. And do you know that there is a statue, a headless statue in this game, that the Chinese media interpret that as to infer, alluding that to the British Museum has a lot of the Buddha heads in the
Yes,
British Museum.
true. I've seen them.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe there, I mean, I don't know whether the game designer did it that way, but at least that's the talk, right? That referring to that. So hopefully the British notice that. Um,
Oh, I don't think so. I think in Britain, people are. It's too sophisticated a message for them to understand. If I have to be honest.
Well, and then the other thing is, if we're talking about DEI, I actually think what really people who lack the DEI are those game journalists, the so-called game journalists who are so ignorant. They don't know much about this is a Chinese classic, right? The Journey to the
Mm,
West. They don't know much about. They don't seem
no.
interested. There were even netizens point that out, saying, "Well, what do you mean this is such a new phenomenon? We know Wukong, right? We've learned, we've studied, we learned those stories." Seems to me it is the mainstream media who hasn't been interested in talking about not just the Chinese, but other countries' classics, histories, and art thing. So they are the one who actually should do some reflection of their own lack of a DEI, don't you think?
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. This is absolutely correct. I mean, they're interested in this issue in the abstract and in a completely self-serving way. But when it comes to actually, taking an interest, a genuine interest in other cultures, they never do. I mean, it is an absolute. Chinese literature is tremendous. Nobody. I mean, the I call it the story of the stone, the
No,
great novel.
no.
Others, there are other names that have been given in English, but it is certainly, in my opinion, the equal of any other novel, of any of the great novels of Western literature. You can count the number of people who've read it on your fingers practically, because except for that small minority of people who are interested in China and Chinese culture, there's never any. I haven't seen a single adaptation of it, for example, in on Western television. You can find adaptations of War and Peace. The BBC has done three of them,
Uh-huh.
of any number of Western or British novels. It's, French novels as well,
Yeah.
Chinese novels. The idea really never crosses anybody's mind. But for me, the biggest illustration of this, the starkest one, was what happened in Iraq when the Americans entered Iraq. And of course, all this was done, on the basis that we were going to save the Iraqis from the cruelties of Saddam Hussein, and we were going to make the women in Iraq free, and
Mhm.
all of that. And of course, what actually happened was that there was a massive um, tidal wave of pillage
Yeah.
of Iraqi cultural artifacts, some of which go back thousands of years.
Mhm.
And a lot of this subsequently turned out was orchestrated by collectors in the West. I mean, they were the people who were buying these things at rock bottom prices, even as they were being yanked out of Iraqi museums. And I was profoundly shocked. I mean, remember, I come from a country where we have museums like this. And I was even more shocked at the complete lack of interest in this in the media here. I mean, there was nobody really cared. They didn't care that, parts of Nineveh were blown up, that
Mhm.
famous mosques were destroyed, that the Americans established a whole military base on the ruins of the ancient city of Sumer. I mean, it was extraordinary. Oh, the city of Ur in the land of Sumer. Nobody cared. Nobody showed the slightest interest. But about women and all that. About that they talk about, always related, notice, to American and Western cultural problems. But in terms of understanding and relating to the real cultures, the really great things produced by other cultures, if they're not part of the West, nobody's interested in them at all.
And so they bombed Iraq and then they looted also. I think they looted
Absolutely.
the
Yeah,
yeah, different parts of it as well. And then they're
yeah,
doing the same thing now in Gaza. They are bombing
absolutely.
historical sites in Gaza as well. And
Yeah,
nobody
yeah.
talking about that.
No,
Yeah.
nobody talks about it. No one. Just as they looted China.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think we've discussed this before. Go to English country houses, the big stately
Yeah.
homes. You'll find them full of Chinese artworks.
And yeah, and I still feel that it doesn't make much sense for British to keep those things because it doesn't have the same meaning to the British. Other than you looted, you stolen, it's your own very bad colonial history reminder. Why would you want to keep that? Versus these things are made, by different people, their ancestors, and they have history, historical culture, all the significance for different people that means so different for them. Why don't you do them, do your own self a favor and do them a favor, just return all these things to the people. I,
Well,
I
this is
still
absolutely correct. I mean, they don't understand this. I mean, I take it. I'm interested in Chinese painting, but I'm interested in many other aspects of Chinese art, like porcelain, for example. Which, by the way, as I understand it, is obviously something that China has great pride in and did, but it was never considered one of the great art forms. But never mind.
uh-huh,
So, I remember having to explain to someone. They were telling me because they were doing. In fact, it wasn't someone, it was at a law school that I was. There's a very famous case about the fact that one of these stately homes, the treasures there were sold off, and that led to all sorts of legal problems. And there was a lot, there were some Ming vases there, and there were some questions about why these, what were the Ming vases? What was Ming? Who was he? And all that kind of thing. And then I explained, and then people were asking me in all seriousness, well, why are these vases more valuable than other Chinese vases? And I said, well, there are different dynasties. Within the
yeah,
dynasties, there are specific periods when particular items, porcelain items, are produced. And of course, there's different ranges of quality. I
uh-huh,
said, if you're talking about some of the absolute top pieces that were produced under the Song, the Ming, the
mhm,
Qing, you're talking about some of the greatest artworks in the world.
yeah,
They're all looking at me, goggle eyed. And the English houses are full of these things. They don't know what they are.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
know.
They see them as trophies, but
They
they
see
don't.
them as
Yeah,
trophies. They
yeah,
have no meaning or understanding of what they are.
yeah. Which,
You know,
yeah, which is
you see them used as flower pots sometimes, or the other thing people do. It's very common, and this is in stately homes. They turn them into lamps. You know, they stick electric, they drill
yeah.
things through them and stick lamps in them and things of this kind.
And there were paintings. There is a long, very famous
Yeah,
painting. They couldn't take the whole thing. They cut it. They
yeah,
just cut them
absolutely.
into pieces.
Yeah,
Uh,
is this the one about the instructress? Because
I
there's a
think so.
very
I mean,
famous one in the British Museum,
uh-huh.
which is in which she's instructing the various members of
Yeah,
the palace on how
uh-huh.
to
Yeah.
the admonitions of the instructress. This is the English title for it. So it probably isn't
Okay.
the Chinese one. But it's an
Mhm.
extraordinary painting. Um, the British Museum takes it out of its basement about once every 5 years so
Mhm.
that we can see it because very few people have any interest in it here.
Yeah. And it's probably multiple these kind of paintings, a long,
Yeah,
big
absolutely.
painting.
Yeah.
They just cut
Oh, yeah.
them, yeah, because they
Cut
have
them,
no idea what
exactly.
they are.
No,
Yeah.
no.
And in fact, actually talking about the game, I think considering, I mean, one of the reason for the success is the story itself. It's interesting
Mm,
story, right? So it's
mm,
not a it's not like you just get some people together to make up story, but it's based on a book, right? And the
mm,
book is interesting. And so lots of people are saying there is definitely, and the more interesting is that when they made the game, it was totally geared towards the Chinese market. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to make a game for the Western
mm,
audience. It's not like
mm,
that. But the
mm.
Western just have the audience that people are interested.
Yeah.
So I actually think now considering both in Britain and in the US, it seems like Hollywood and all these film industries going downhill. Maybe the next thing is work with China, dig out all the 5,000 years of the histories and making movies and making stories, making, together work with China on
Oh,
the
yes.
cultural industry. Don't you think they should do that?
Absolutely. Well, this is so interesting because there was a brief period. It lasted from about 19 when basically when Nixon went to China around that time, and it continued for about 10 years after, when there was a sudden inc- opening of the West's
Mhm.
eyes about Chinese art. And there were exhibitions, lots of exhibitions at that time of Chinese art. There was lots of connections with the Chinese authorities at that time. A lot of artworks and paintings and things like that were brought from China and shown. And they were a tremendous success,
Mm,
at least in Britain,
okay.
with the British public. People were fascinated by them,
Mm,
and it opened an awful lot of eyes. I remember taking my little niece when she was very small to one of these things, and how impressed she was. You don't see any of that now.
mhm. Yeah, well, it presents opportunity again, having a good
Yeah,
relationship with China, work on the art
yeah.
culture industry could be big next, the next thing.
Well, it
Um,
could absolutely, and people, I think, because there's some elements of Chinese culture. I mean, there's the martial arts
yeah,
movies and
yeah,
things of that kind, which have their place. It's not something I'm particularly interested in myself, but I accept it has its place. But again, this originates because the West has its own perceptions about this, and it tries to fit this into um, its own mindset. Um, Trying to understand that there are paintings, there's music, Chinese music, in my opinion, particularly the music that's played on the tin,
hmm
has massive potential
yeah,
to be understood and to be enormously interesting to Western audiences if there was any serious attempt on the part of the elites here to try to introduce people to it. But you're absolutely right. Introduce Westerners to it. I remember when I went to Shanghai, I discovered that there is a symphony orchestra there that
hmm
performs Western classical music, and I've got recordings, and it is very good. Just
hmm
say there are
yeah,
lots of Chinese violinists. There isn't a single person in the West I know of who's made any effort to study and understand the music of the tin. The last person who did was a Dutch diplomat who wrote a book about it before the Second World War.
Yeah. And in this game, the black myth, Wukong, the music actually is one thing that got a lot of attention. People actually are humming and
Yeah,
singing about it.
yeah,
So
there you
I
go.
think it's coming. Yeah, I actually
Yeah,
think there's a potential there that the West should pay attention. In
yeah.
particular, the Hollywood is not doing very well, right? The British film industry are not doing well. So here's your
Yeah,
opportunity, So
yeah. Well, if you're talking about modern Chinese films, I mean,
yes.
some of them are quite exceptional.
Mhm.
And again, I am convinced that they would be very interesting for many people in the
Yeah,
West.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, when there was a real interest in them for a short time,
No.
again, people did take an interest in them. So
Mhm.
of course, now, again,
Yeah.
it's kung fu films and things of that kind that people watch. And I'm not saying, as I said, I don't want to be overly critical. I'm not saying that's wrong. All I'm saying is it's only one aspect of what happens in China. You're talking about one of the greatest civilizations, the only one that has a direct history going all the way back to Stone Age times. It's a fact. No one
Yeah.
else has such a complete and unbroken line of development.
Yeah.
But
And
of
well
course, nobody
documented. Yeah.
well documented, as we
Yeah.
discussed. Yeah.
And by the way, my background today, it's the temple where Xuanzang, which is the main character of Journey to the West. Journey to the West is there's a real person, right?
Oh
That
yeah.
monk. This is where he worked. He was the head monk in that
Oh
place.
wow.
So I
Where is that
visited.
in? Wow.
It's yeah, it's in Xi'an.
Yeah.
It's pretty well preserved, and there's a tower on the other side, which is not in there. At the time, that tower was the tallest building in the world. At that
Is
time, it
this
was
is this is this the Big Goose Pavilion or something like that,
yeah,
or,
yeah,
or,
yes,
or
yes,
pagoda or
yes,
whatever? Yeah.
yes. It's there.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
not on my picture,
I've
but
seen I've
yeah,
seen pictures. Yeah. Very
yeah,
dramatic.
yeah. And then
Wow.
this, yeah, this I put it there because I find it interesting. And I visited that place, and they show the map where Xuanzang went the whole route to India. He's very faithful and very determined to get the
Mm,
Buddhist monk books and etc.
yes.
So it's a real story, but of
Oh,
course
absolutely.
yeah. So it's
Yeah, I mean, they made a lovely. Somebody wrote a lovely story about it. I can't remember the name of the author, but
Wu
I've got it.
Cheng'en,
Yeah, there you
yeah,
go. I've
Wu
got it here
Cheng'en,
somewhere. Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Catherine, my wife, was interested in it recently
Okay.
because I have to say one of her students wanted to do a master's on it. So there
Oh,
you go.
okay.
Well, in fact, I don't think he wanted. I think he is doing a master's on
Okay.
it.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, just so the final thing, my own observation when I was looking into this whole game thing, craziness, all the I noticed something difference. We talk a lot about the difference between China and the West. Now
Mm,
he has a band. Wukong has this golden thing, look like a crown on his head.
mm,
What I find fascinating is that the Western crown is giving you power, right? When somebody is
yeah.
crowned, you have a lot of power. But what's put on him is actually to limit his power.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? That
It's
he is
very
such a is such a powerful person. He has all these, supernatural things, but he has to be controlled. So that's why they put a crown-like thing to control him. I find that's the opposite of a
that
crown.
is that is absolutely fascinating, and it does illustrate a difference between the West and China. You remember what I said, that the word emperor, which the West uses to
Uh-huh.
discuss to
Yeah.
describe the Huangdi,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's a completely different thing,
Yeah.
and you can see again that the Chinese have a different approach to this. So a
Yeah.
symbol of power in one place
Yeah.
is a symbol of restraint in the other one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And it's so important, it's
Yeah,
it's where okay, he gave all this power and he's actually doing a lot of the good things, but still he needs to be controlled.
that's
He
right.
cannot be giving
Yeah,
limitless power. Somebody has to
that's right.
control him. That's when they crown him. I find that's absolutely fascinating. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. With that, we talked a lot. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Speak to you next week. Right.
Yes. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.